welcome to the second parter of the Labyrinth and Legend doubleheader. We're heading into Labyrinth. Speaking of Labyrinth, the head bad guy is played by the legendary, legit, unquestionable, dang near king of pop,
the Thin White Duke,
David Bowie, Jareth, as he is called in this film. And we were talking a moment before I hit the record button about Bowie versus Meatloaf.
Well, you brought it up. We're firmly
we are
with
firmly
in the opposite camp here, sir.
Oh, like I love how I tried to like make this like, hey, we're talking. And you're like, no, we weren't talking. We weren't even thinking about this.
We
soundly reject
you. Can't see on camera the look I'm giving my
Get
husband
out
right now.
You're fired.
Yeah.
You can't fire
You
me.
just got glared at hardcore.
So good Lord. Okay, so anyway,
you defend yourself because you know.
I had discovered Meatloaf a couple years back, and a couple of his songs.
I think it's because he loves food.
Yeah, that's what it is.
You
exactly.
do like Meatloaf a lot.
You figured it out. I could care less for his music because
I like Meatloaf too, but not this much.
Good Lord. So the song I was introduced to him years ago was "Midnight at the Lost and Found," and it is an absolutely just lovely song. Like I love bopping along to that. Well, when Meatloaf passed away a month ago or so.
Yeah, not too long ago. Yeah.
He passed away, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to listen to more Meatloaf. And so I was talking to my people I work with, and they're like, oh yeah, no, Meatloaf is amazing. He's legit. I'm like, crazy. Everyone loves Meatloaf. So in my classroom during the day for like 2 days, I just played Meatloaf back to back to back to back to
back.
Those
poor kids.
And I will throat punch you metaphorically. And it was funny because there was no single song in the Meatloaf listology or whatever you want to call it, discography that I didn't like. I loved every single song in the Meatloaf collection. And David Bowie is all right to me. I know, blasphemy of the highest order. I love him and Bing Crosby in the Christmas special Bing Crosby was filming that one year.
Yeah, that is really cool.
And having those two on screen and just watching the Bing Crosby, the king of the crooners, and David Bowie, this upstart young star who has as good of a voice as Bing did, and they just kind of have this kind of just rap session.
Good moment.
Where they put together this song and you just you get choked up watching it because now both of them are dead, obviously. Yeah. Bing died soon before David Bowie did. But it's just it's Christmassy. And it's just like this moment of these the most unlikely pairings you could ever put together are on screen, preserved for eternity for us to just sit back and watch every Christmas time and watch and enjoy. So I say that because Bowie he's a legend. I don't question that. But I have found a lot more joy and satisfaction and enjoyment out of Meatloaf because there's so much meaning in it.
So meaty, and it's got that ketchup and brown sugar.
Where's my hammer? Throw at you. Anyway,
you can slice it up and put it in sandwiches.
Oh no, that's blasphemous.
So they both, my wife and James both love David Bowie.
Absolutely.
And they adore him. So that's the way we're gonna start off the show, is me making the claim that I love.
I know, no, that's a fair thing. I'm just having fun with his name because it's whatever. Meatloaf is kind of I've always wondered the origin of that nickname. Like, where did that come from? They decided to call himself Meatloaf.
It just happened.
And and the thing is, I like his music too. Yeah. It's just I like Bowie just way better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure if I sat down and I listened to Bowie's entire discography, I might be convinced. But if I'm looking for music to just kind of settle me down and settle into a mood and kind of just jam and enjoy, it's Meatloaf all day long. Like, I'll just jam to that man.
And I would do anything for love, but I just won't do that, Aaron. Sorry.
And on that bombshell.
Yes! I'm good at this stuff.
We're going to play the theme music and get started.
It is one of those things. It's fair, though. It's like everybody likes their different types of genres of stuff or whatever. It's just we happen to be in the Bowie camp. We like him better.
Or the right camp.
I think I found where he got his name.
No, because it's valid that you like Meatloaf. Because, like I said, it's like Meatloaf's good stuff. It's just I wouldn't rank him as high for myself as David Bowie would.
Okay. Meatloaf's origin quickly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'll try to be quick. So Apparently, he was born, quote, bright red and stayed that way for days, and that his dad said he looked like 9 pounds of ground chuck and convinced hospital staff to put the name Meat on his crib. He was later called ML in reference to his initials, but when his weight increased, his 7th grade classmates referred to him as Meatloaf in commemoration to his 5 foot 2 inches, 240 pound stature.
That's Meatloaf.
Yeah, he was like a dwarf.
Short and stocky.
Short and stocky.
Big boy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that
Cool.
on that additional bombshell, buckle up, hold on, strap in. We are headed into one of the greatest movies of all time, and some recollections of some significant moments in our lives with Labyrinth. Coming up next here on Nerds by Screenlight.
Get nerdy with me. Talk nerdy to me. Get nerdy with me. All I really need for you to do is just please.
I can stop.
Talk to me. Talk nerdy to me.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, and it's Labyrinth time, which this movie survived the investigation and interrogation that James and I usually give movies. There are moments in this movie where you just kind of go,
Yeah, there's down points.
but overall, from start to finish,
Oh, God.
this thing is a masterclass. And so I am a Muppets fan. I adore Muppets, movies, television shows, everything else. So when you watch this movie, what you have to do is you have to also watch Muppet Christmas Carol like on the side. Because the moments that you see in Labyrinth, there are moments that echo the Muppet Christmas Carol. Like when she's walking down the labyrinth, there are characters on the side that you don't see. You only see like for maybe 30 seconds. And then they engage and they have a conversation and they do a thing and then they move on. In Muppet Christmas Carol, it's the same thing. There are characters that you see as one-offs that bring so much to the story and enrich the story so much, not just with what they have to say, but how they look.
Oh, yeah.
And within Labyrinth, the Muppets situation here, I don't even have words for it. It is insanely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, just like we just talked about it, but last week you guys heard us talk about Legend and how it did all the prosthetics and things so good. All that detail is on these Muppets.
Yeah.
And they are all unique and kind of amazing to look at.
And they're all separately voiced and they're all separately acted. The scenes in the throne room where the song Dance Baby Dance or whatever that song is.
Dance the Magic Dance.
Dance Magic Dance. There are like 50 puppeteers / people involved in that situation. It's bonkers.
Yeah.
How much coordination and how much you have to hide the puppeteers and you have to do the things to do to make that work. I would just sit and watch that scene over and over with notes just to figure out how to do it. And you watch some behind the scenes stuff that looked at a lot of that stuff. It's just, without question, it was directed by Jim Henson. Brian Henson was in it. Frank Oz is in there.
Yeah.
Like all the Muppeteers, all the Muppet staff, all the people who have made the Muppets great.
Jim Henson's like A-team is here.
Yeah.
Boom.
And it is an A-team job. This movie rocks your socks. And it starts rocking your socks from the minute it starts. Now, it's the CGI owl, which was the first time a fully CGI character had been on screen in a film ever.
So cool.
And it looks good.
Yeah.
All these years later, it still looks good. Think about it, this thing was made in 1985-ish, the same time Legend was being filmed, so 84, 85.
Yeah.
That owl still holds up.
Well, I mean, it's still good. I mean, you can tell compared to our modern day CGI. But still, it's good.
Yeah.
Like, look at the owl. It's great.
Yeah.
It looks like detailed and everything else. I'm like, all right. But I mean, that's one of the things, like, me and Vicki talked about it over breakfast again at Zazzy. Because we're the same day as Legend. Remember that, folks. We're on the same day.
Yeah.
You're not. Jim Henson had that bad problem where he just believed in all the stuff that he could do.
Yeah.
That he could just throw his crew at it and make it happen.
Yeah.
And we'll see there's a moment in this movie where it kind of falls apart, but they try.
Yeah.
They try to push the envelope as hard as they can.
Yeah.
And you get brilliant stuff out of it too.
Yeah.
Because like, this is good.
Well, and you look at, so my Muppet movie love ends in the Muppet kind of reboot that they did with Amy Adams and what's his bucket, the guy from How I Met Your Mother.
Okay.
What movie was this?
This was the Muppet. Well, they called it the Muppets, and it was where they had Gary, and he was a fan of the Muppets and all this other stuff, and like they were trying to do all the things, and so that was, and then there was Muppets Most Wanted, which was a train wreck, and I hated it, and it made me very angry. And then everything else after that I haven't watched.
Okay.
So that's from my Muppet live. I've seen every
Well, did
Muppet.
they have any of the Hensons? Was Brian involved in any of this?
I don't know if he was involved in Muppets Most Wanted. He had to have been involved in the Muppets reboot.
Okay.
Because it really felt like a heartfelt movie with good, strong stuff. So anyway, you have to understand how much passion goes into Muppeteering. Yeah. That original crew, which some of them are not around anymore. Many of them have passed. Big Bird's puppeteer passed away recently. Original puppeteer. A lot of that crew is getting older, and we're losing them. That time period when the Muppets, there was Muppets, the Muppet Show, not Muppets Tonight, which was all right, but the Muppet Show, and all like Jim Henson and his crew. It wasn't just Jim Henson.
Yeah. He had a crew of people.
It was there was no question in my mind that will be a historical marker from Jim Henson's beginning to Jim Henson and his crew's end. This was a unique time in American television. And even when if you were to probably talk to a puppeteer who is like steeped in the history and the knowledge and the groups, would tell you there was no better time than when Jim Henson and his crew was on the scene.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird though. It's like in order to get his real start, he had to go to England.
Yep.
And that's where he kind of exploded.
Yep.
And then it moved over here, and then it caught traction because at first no one wanted to give him the time of day.
Nope.
And he did some minor little bits on movies and stuff like that, and then moved to England, and then everything kind of took off.
Yeah. So when you look at this movie, you have to realize that the heart and soul of this movie is Jim Henson and his crew. You can't separate. You can't ignore that because it's the same as Dark Crystal. The reason why the Dark Crystal is so beloved and so incredible is it's a Henson production. There is, without question, that heart and soul poured. And like you said, they push boundaries.
Yeah, that's why Dark Crystal kind of was like this weird movie where they're kind of like, it's amazing and all the effects and things they did. Like, Dark Crystal's so detailed, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of like the movie kind of fell flat overall because they just didn't. He tried to tackle that story kind of on his own, the writing portion of it, and kind of. In the Dark Crystal, in Labyrinth, you get. There's Terry Jones involved. There's like two other writers that were involved with Jim to make. Then they went through like something like 30 revisions.
Yeah. George Lucas is a producer on this film.
Yeah, to give us Labyrinth.
Yeah. And it's pretty awesome. So the opening scene is legit because it starts with Jennifer Connelly, and if I was to stack her up against Mia Sara in the two movies they were in, I would say Jennifer Connelly, she wins.
100%.
Yeah.
Without question. So the movie starts with her, like, you think she's in like medieval England somewhere, and she's like, "Goblin King, I will. You have no. Oh, I forgot this line." And all of a sudden, she looks at the clock. Oh no, it's past the time. And you're like, "What's going on?" The rain starts, and she takes off, and quickly we realize she's actually in modern day America.
Well, she picks up her dress, and there's jeans in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're like, "Wait,
and you
what?"
see sneakers too, I think, and you're like, "Ah."
And then she starts running through the rain, through the streets. She runs through the nice neighborhoods, ends up in not the so nice neighborhoods, like not bad, but like not really.
Well, it was one of those things like it was the backs and fronts. It's the duality thing. Like the fronts of the house are gorgeous.
Yeah, back.
But then when she runs to you see that shot from behind of the houses.
Yeah.
And it's like it's all kind of like trashy and whatever because no one really takes care of the front. You gotta have like the back. You take care of the front.
Front's what
okay,
people
cool.
Well, and that even brings that's the theme of this is again image. Who are we truly?
Yeah.
And what are we saying to people? And what do we think about ourselves and all of their stuff? So she gets home, and stepmom is mad because she's late by an hour, and we were supposed to leave, and you're supposed to take care of the baby, and da. And I love that we don't get too ham-handed with this.
Yeah.
We as a viewer, because we don't know it's her stepmom until she tells her husband, "I'm just the wicked stepmother. She doesn't like me," and you're like, "Ooh." Now there's there's more showing than there is telling.
Yeah.
And we're going, "Oh yeah, okay, all right, this is good. All right, I'm getting this. And so then, but mom and dad are very much off screen for most of this.
Yeah.
We see them for a little bit.
They're very flat characters in a way. I mean, you get her emotions of being frustrated with
Right.
Jennifer Connelly's character.
Yeah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, don't really, the dad is just briefly there, and he's so he's like cardboard man.
Yeah.
And then they get them out of the camera because they're not that important.
Nope.
They're there to set a tone for something that goes on with Sarah's character, and then poof.
What I think is interesting, because we talk about narrators and reliable narrators in fiction, right?
Yeah.
And so when you read a book, if a person is telling you the story from the first person perspective, or whatever, you always have to question their reliability as a narrator.
Exactly.
So in this movie, what my theory is that everything we're seeing is from her.
Yes.
Now, obviously, we're not in her eyes. We're not seeing it as she's walking around, but every piece we see is her perspective.
Yeah.
And so her parents, for her in that moment, are very flat.
Yeah.
She doesn't
Mom
like
is
her
just
stepmom.
the angry one.
Yeah, and dad is just kind of meh.
Like a machine man.
Yeah.
Because he's there just to serve a function, really.
Right. And she's an angsty teenager because they ask her, well, you should go out and date. You should be dating. And in this point in the 80s, dating was like 16 years old. You'd be dating somebody probably by that point.
Yeah.
And so that gives us also a setting of, okay, this is how old she is. This is where we're at. Here's our timeline. Okay, we're set. They don't have to tell you that. They show it to you.
Yep.
And you as an audience member are trusted to be smart enough to go, okay, I got that. Good. Figured it out. Moving on. And they don't wait. Legend?
Yes.
In this, it's like, moving on. Let's go.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're just you're marching. And so the baby, obviously, she's mad. And
she has to babysit her baby brother.
Here's the thing. I think baby brother is stepmom's kid.
Yeah.
And so there's that also additional element of, well, he's not my true brother.
Yeah.
It could be, yeah.
He's not my family.
They don't really tell you that, but...
But what the beauty of the showing versus telling is, you're allowed to go.
She does have blonde hair like his stepmom, so you could make that.
Well, the dad had lighter brown hair, too, so it's kind of hair.
So I think it's interesting because
But it is an interesting take.
Yeah.
I never thought of that before.
Because
so
she doesn't, because we made the comment, she's a terrible babysitter. But what if she's being a terrible babysitter on purpose because she doesn't identify him as family? He's not worth my time.
Mm-hmm.
I have to make sure that he stays alive. That's all I care about.
And he stole her teddy bear.
Yeah, it's like, it's something she has to deal with.
Yeah.
Because she wants to go play and do her things.
Right.
And like, especially when they violate her room and take her toy for the kid. It's like, how dare you?
Right.
How dare you go in my bedroom?
Yeah, her indignation rises up where it's like, no.
And so then she basically, and I love this moment. So she's like saying the words to like get rid of him. And Jim Henson is so brilliant in his storytelling that you see the goblins. Did she say it? No, she didn't. Shut up. And they look back at the screen. And then you get her going, I can't remember.
A lot of this is also laid out by Terry Jones in his version of the script.
Yeah.
Because Terry Jones is a brilliant director himself and wrote and directed huge chunks of the Monty Python movies and their TV show.
Yeah.
So like you see those things where they move from like chunk of story, or move back and forth between perspectives a lot.
Yeah.
This is Terry Jones's hand in this movie where you get that a lot. And then as you move through the movie, you get it too, where it's kind of, you move from this set piece to another, to another, but keep it so it flows.
Yep.
And everything is kind of connected.
Right.
Even though they're very drastically different.
Right.
But it's all that connected. And those comedy punches that you get in this movie, because we had moments where we all were cracking up. And that's him.
Yeah.
That's the Monty Python coming into here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it helps. So here's the deal. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched bloopers from the Muppet Show or the Muppet movies or Muppet anything.
Mm-hmm.
They are the most hilarious group of people when they're off script. Like, stuff that ends up in series and movies in the Muppets often sometimes comes from those unintentional bloopers. So if you go YouTube and just do Muppets bloopers and just find some. The biggest one and the most hilarious one is it's like a 15-minute long blooper reel from the Jug Porn or whatever Christmas special.
Yeah.
And
that's the thing with the wheel.
Yeah.
That's
and
funny.
they try and get the wheel just right for the scene, and you've got two Muppets actors underneath, like playing them and talking and voicing them, and the wheel doesn't land right for like 20 takes. And these guys are just like, every time they're just they're just cracking wise because they're tired and they're annoyed, but they just keep playing it up. It is the best 15 minutes of your life.
The last part is my favorite because when they finally get it, because they're just these puppets, they're just like they're mice, and his mom just kind of falls over at the end of it, and the son goes, "Can we do it again, Bud?" He goes, "Shut up, son."
But they that's the Muppeteers inhabit those characters.
Yeah.
And so when you have a strong writer like that who knows how to do that humor and know how to do that storytelling, and you get incredible guys who can fill those words with power and character and meaning. That's magic.
So that's when we got that good little jump between her and the
yeah,
goblins.
yeah. They're
that's
like,
his comedic
come
timing.
on, say it,
like,
say it,
yeah.
say it. And then and she's like, well, all she's got to say is and then she finally says it. And what you said and what I kind of agreed with is like, I wish they would have come back and been like,
yeah, like a moment of them being like, yes,
but they don't, which is fine. Like I get that. And
Yeah.
so then obviously the baby gets stolen, and
The way they show that, like again, this is the show don't tell.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the constant crying just stops.
Yep.
And that's when she's like, "Uh-oh."
yeah, and she goes back in, and she inches towards the cradle and the music, and you're just like, oh.
Evil laughter of a
Yeah.
goblin.
the
Yeah.
shadow
See
goblins in
him.
the
Yeah, they're
background
kind of
hiding.
and then she opens it, the baby's gone, and then she sees like she's turning, and then Jareth arrives.
Yeah.
The big bad David Bowie is on the scene, and I love his character in this movie. Like I know I'm probably preaching to several choirs at this point, but Bowie was a master at this.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
He was
fantastic.
a master evil guy. And he didn't play it like, well, I just have to do this. He's like, no, I'm doing this. I'm going to take your baby, and I'm going to make him adore.
Well, he's
Yeah.
like, I'm doing what you asked of me.
right. Yeah. You
So what
asked,
am I doing wrong? You asked for this.
Yeah. You said the words.
But
We're-
in a non-apologetic
Right.
way. He's like,
Yeah.
I've done all that you've asked.
Yeah.
Play by my rules as
Yeah.
well.
And I think that's what kind of gets her going. Like, no, that's not fair. That's also a theme of this movie is, that's not fair. You keep saying
Yeah, that's
that.
not fair.
Like,
Yeah.
what are you comparing this to?
Yeah.
He calls her on that.
I love that line because it's just like the reality of us as humans is we do that too. Well, this
Totally.
isn't fair. It's like, well, what are you comparing it to? What? Oh. Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
So
I mean, she grabs it later where she's not. Oh, well, that's the world. It's not fair.
and she
Yeah,
realizes
things aren't fair.
Well, that's just kind of the world.
Yeah.
So there, I'm taking
'Cause-
them anyway.
Overall, folks, this is a coming of age movie. It's
Yeah.
about growing up.
So Jennifer Connelly, her character Sarah is presented with various challenges that are very atypical of kind of like, you got to figure this out, you got to grow up, you got to challenge yourself, you got to do your own thing. And it is, again, I love Hoggle.
Yeah, Hoggle. Poor Hoggle.
He is such a well-written character. There's
So quirky.
Yeah, and just so much to
Like
him.
his first scene, it's very quirky.
He's spraying the
what-
fairies.
Yeah.
Even
55,
before that-
56,
Yeah, he's
59,
counting. Yes.
60. Ah! And she's like, what are you doing? Well, they'll eat you. And she's like, ow!
Yeah, she gets bitten by one of them. Yes.
Which, as like a teenager watching that, I'm like, everything I thought I knew about fairies just got blown up,
Yeah.
and I'm always like, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is them, like, things aren't as they appear.
Yeah. I love how atypical it is. I love how it flips the fairy tale
Yeah.
on his head. It's not your typical fairy tale. And like Hoggle is just kind of, he's just kind of indifferent to her. He's like, well, here's the door.
Yeah.
And it's just, but I love how you think that's it. He's gone. You won't see him again.
Yeah.
But he keeps
Coming
coming back.
Yep.
And he serves a purpose. And you don't get the sense until you actually see him and Jareth interact. Oh, he's actually a plant.
Yep.
Like he is actually a part of this whole process where Jareth has him in place because anybody who comes for Jareth, they meet Hoggle, and Hoggle sends them around and tricks them and does all the
Yep.
things. So yeah, I love Hoggle. I love the depths of his character because he does end up like nearly killing her, and he ends up regretting it and hating himself for it. It's interesting when we're jumping ahead. Obviously, we'll jump back and
We'll jump back and forth. As we normally do.
Yeah.
We jump back and forth. but
when
it's okay.
he finally meets up with her and he says, "I don't apologize for what I did. Like, I'm not like I can't because it's what I had to do,
And I'm a coward.
and I'm a coward." So he equal parts won't apologize, but he also equal parts owned it. He says, "Because I'm a coward. And I had to do this because I'm not a strong person,
Yeah.
or strong wood dwarf or whatever." And it's funny because Jennifer Connelly, all that she's learned up until this moment, tells her, "I forgive you." And he's going, "Wait, what? Why would you forgive me?" And it's just a beautiful little moment because it's that not being a child anymore, understanding what it means to forgive someone despite all that they do to you, and sometimes you just have to do what you got to do.
Well, the thing is, and her having that moment with them causes him to. All of a sudden, we see him start doing brave stuff to save them. He changes.
It's that cowardly lion kind of dynamic of, oh, I can actually do this. I can be strong. I can be, and
like, even though he believes himself to be weak.
Yeah.
Because like
He tackles this huge robot thing.
Exactly.
He takes over the machine.
yeah.
Yeah, he fights for them, and it's kind of like, and then he
And he
falls
falls
like,
off and no one catches him. And
Yeah,
I was the
that
only
was
one that
funny.
said anything of you three. I was like, what?
the way he just kind of flops. Yeah, but it's one of those things. Like, yeah, it's like, and he still believes himself to be a weak person, but everything else. But it's like, no,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you.
He does find his strength eventually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he's growing and changing with her in a way.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
guess you could say he's a good mirror to her.
Yeah.
Because as she's growing and changes, he grows and changes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's a sign of a good movie.
Yeah.
When your protagonist and her crew is growing and learning.
Yeah.
Star Wars, Rey, could you please get back
Yeah.
on that, please, on that train of having a character grow and not being a Mary Sue? Anyway, Rey is so powerful in Star Wars.
She's great.
She doesn't do it, but she
No.
doesn't learn anything. Nothing is ever learned. She's a master Jedi from the start.
Yeah.
She's able to pilot the Millennium Falcon without a lesson.
Always living on this desert planet, but you can fly a starship like it's.
And you can, I can find this, or I can fix this. I can fix the Millennium Falcon. You just do this. No, I've short-circuited myself, and I have to work with only one hand now.
It didn't bother me that much, to be honest.
Oh, it bothers me.
I
it
can
bothers
see
me
that.
as a narrative thing. It's disgusting.
Narratively, in male, female, whatever, if your character, if they don't have to earn any of it, what's their point as a character? That's my biggest protest against Tom Hanks. Sorry, not Tom Hanks. Wow. Nope.
The
Where'd
look
you
I
go?
Tom Cruise. There
Yeah,
we go.
okay,
You gotta let
Tom
Tom
Cruise.
mix those guys up.
Tom Cruise and his characters in most of his movies is, he's going to win. Like, there's no challenge there.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, he just constantly wins and wins and wins and wins. And, in his later movies, there's been a little bit of like, okay, he has to suffer and whatever, but it's he's always just great at what he does, and he's an expert.
And that's not interesting, folks.
No, it's not. It's fun to watch for maybe a minute, and then you go home and you don't ever watch it again. But the power of a movie that you can watch again and again and again, Labyrinth, is that movie.
Because you
Yeah.
see it in Sarah, the way she has to like suffer and
Yep.
struggle and try to figure things out for
Yep.
herself emotionally
Yep.
to move forward.
And there's so many moments in this movie. So we get Hoggle. He gets called Hogwart.
Yeah, they make
Which
fun of his
threw me
names.
off. I was
He gets called all kinds of names. She finally does get it right. Sarah actually calls him Hoggle.
well, not even the Goblin King calls him by the right name.
Oh no,
Yeah.
because that's the whole point of Jareth is
Like,
you know
here,
keeping him
what's
down.
your face?
I don't
Yeah.
care about
Do
you.
my work.
Yeah. So she ends up having to find like her way. She runs up against these doors, which are like they're playing cards basically.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, well, which one of you is telling the truth? Well, I don't know. I don't really know. And I think the reality of it is, if you look at the mythology of it, neither of those playing card characters know what the truth is.
Yeah.
They're just there to confuse the heck out of anybody who walks in.
Yes.
And so she chooses the door that now takes her down, and the hands, which is, I love.
bizarre and
I
fascinating.
love it because it's not creepy enough to be like it's just like, it's fun, but it's also weird. And she's just like, what is happening? What are you? Okay, wait, want to go up? You want to go down?
They had
And the hands shaped to make
Yeah.
it look like faces.
they had 75 people in like a 30-foot shaft
Yeah.
to shoot that scene.
That's crazy.
And they were like not really laying down, but kind of at angles.
yeah.
Because they tried to do it at first with them laying down, but the actors would get like sick from laying on their stomachs for so long because the way they shoot the scenes, you have to keep going over and over and over and
Yeah,
over
yeah.
again, and having to like catch her and being like hold on to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
crazy.
because they couldn't see too.
Yeah.
They were blind.
Yeah.
And a lot of like those hand motions that they were doing were making the face. They were kind of blind at doing that too.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
see it.
By the way, on a safety note, behind the scenes stuff, it didn't really occur to the directors just the dangerous points they were putting their actress through
Yeah,
until
they
she was in those moments. They were going,
Yeah.
oh, wow, she's a trooper. She's not complaining at all, but that is a little unsafe.
Yes.
Oh,
Whoops.
the 80s.
Now she put up with a lot of stuff.
She
that,
did.
That's why like
She's
I-
still around.
they make comment. I think it was Jim Henson made comments, Brian Henson made comments, and
Yeah.
Bowie made comments where it's like she put up with so much stuff
Yeah.
and trooped through this movie just great, and they loved her for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard a bad thing about Jennifer Connelly as an actress. In this movie, her acting chops are,
I think it's her first movie, too.
yeah, she's legit. She's that, all that in a bag of chips and more. Okay, so the hands drop her into the, what is it? Not obulette?
Obelette.
Obelette. yeah.
Obelette. And that's when Hoggle shows up and says, well, this is where you throw people where you can forget them. And that is actually what happened.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing in medieval
Yeah, I
England.
Googled it.
There, you would throw them into a pit. There was no way out, and you would just die.
Yeah,
eventually.
most times, like sometimes, like depending on the person and the crimes and what you want to repurpose that for.
Yep.
Sometimes there'd be tons of bodies in there.
Yep.
Or sometimes they'd just throw them in a obulette and then just seal it up.
Yep.
And that's where you put the person that you want to forget about.
Yep. So
didn't know
then
this.
Hoggle
Yeah.
uses a door, which I love
Oh, this is
how this
fantastic.
works. So he's like, oh, well, I'll get us out. And so he puts a door against the wall, opens it, and it's a closet. And he's like, oh, a closet. I brought the wrong door. Closes it, does something to it.
Opens it the other way.
Opens it the other way, and it's
Yeah.
the outside. And I love that moment. It's just, again, the power of Muppets and imagination. They had to probably do some work. They probably had a moving stage where they're able to move like the closet, and then they pulled the closet away from the door so that they could then do that or whatever. But it is so effortlessly done. You're just
It's
like,
so cool.
and you laugh because you're like, it's funny, I love it. And it's not played over. It just happens, and then they move on. And I get a kick out of it. So now what happens? What happens after they get out of the oubliette?
The faces are like, don't go back.
Yeah.
Danger.
The
And
stone
then he's
faces
like,
are like-
oh, be quiet. They're just trying to throw you off. Oh, come on, I haven't said it in a long time. Okay, fine. Going, oh, thank you. We don't believe you, though.
I love it. Again, that's the power of a script
Yeah.
with a bunch of people who are talented at Muppet work. I will say that. I will continue to say that. I know you'll probably get tired of it listening to me say it, but no questions asked. This is one of the greatest movies with Muppeteering. And,
Oh, yeah.
and
Oh,
just
it's so good.
like the A+ crew, like James said, they're on tap. They're on tap here, and they blow everything out of the water. Okay, so then we get the faces, and that's funny.
And then
then
they're in the tunnel with the cleaner.
yep, the cleaner.
Wait. But the Goblin King shows up.
Yeah, the
first.
Goblin
Well,
King
he talks
shows
to
up.
him first, and then the cleaner pops
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Goblin shows up and tells Hoggle, you're supposed to be doing this thing. And, obviously Jennifer Connelly's like, what? You were, what? And he's like, and then he says, I'll send the cleaners after you. And he says, okay, cleaner. And then, so this big old machine.
The cleaners?
Which is like,
Yeah.
the cleaners. It's the cleaners run. And it's this machine. It's almost like the Ninja Turtles, like, thing that would come through the sewer. I think it was Shredder's thing. Where it's like,
It's like the machine, like to chop up anything that's in the sewer.
Yeah.
It looks
So-
like this giant boulder coming towards you with all these knives
Yeah.
that are spinning on
So
every
they
angle.
run from
Ugh.
it. They get it and they dodge it at the last minute. And then one of my favorite part of this movie. So it passes by and it reveals it's just a bunch of dudes,
Yeah, Goblin's just turning cranks.
Driving
this machine. It's kind of like,
and they like run into things down the rest of the hallway.
Yeah.
and like
Just
damage.
keep going.
They just damage the hallway.
Do-do-do.
And it was just like, oh my gosh, that was fantastic. Like it's this big scary thing, but it's just three guys
yeah.
doing their thing. Apparently,
It's a dirty job.
it's a dirty
Well,
job.
it's the beautiful thing where they show you like you said, front and backs of the houses.
Yeah.
Like I love that. It's like that duality thing.
Yeah.
Where it's kind of like, well, what
Things
you
aren't
think
always
is
what they seem.
something
Yep.
is completely different.
Yep. So then they get past the
And they
cleaners.
climb out of the pot.
Yep, they climb out of the pot.
Yes.
That is fantastic. I love how that happens because you see and I don't know if they did this in Matt or how they did this. I think they probably just put them in the pot and said, okay, you're going to open it up and you're going to come out like as you're coming
Yeah.
out of it. But it's so cool, the visual, because you see, obviously, there's nothing underneath it. Like they're not trying to hide it or whatever. Like it's not a box where you could see. Like they actually do where there's space, blank space underneath that pot. And so they come out and it's so cool because you saw them climbing out of it. And again, it's just that mythology building. This world is magic.
Yeah.
This world is weird and it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And it's not as
Constantly
you see.
changing too.
Yeah. And then we get the guy with the hat, I think is next. Mm-hmm. And that was
Yeah, the
What was
old
the
guy that
point?
tries to like, yeah.
And there's the guy on top of his head who's like, this guy's so boring.
right.
Yeah.
And then she gives away her ring in payment, which it doesn't come back to that. I hoped they would. It's
Yeah.
the one part of this movie that I'm just like, that's significant, but you don't tell us why.
Well, yeah, because like when she bribes Hoggle to help her out of the
Yeah, she gives him the
oubliette,
plastic.
she gives him the plastic like bracelet.
Yeah.
And then Jareth actually sees it and makes a point of it
Yeah.
to be like, what game are you playing against me, Hoggle? Like,
Yeah.
where'd that plastic thing come from?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know where did it come from. I don't even
Yeah,
know.
so it's like that was kind of cool. And so like the ring and
Yeah.
him like we're like fighting her to like, don't give that up, blah blah. I'm like, well, are we gonna see that on like a significant thing where the ring comes back?
Right.
Yeah.
Or something, but we didn't. It's just kind of
No,
like
we
this,
didn't.
it's just in that moment.
Yep. And then they go into what's next after this?
Oh, what is
Is this
next?
Ludo?
Ludo.
So
Yes.
yeah, so then like they hear these terrible noises, and Hoggle takes off. He's terrified. She's like, "You're my friend." "I'm not your friend. I'm not." And he runs away.
Yeah.
So
Which is really funny watching Hoggle try to run away because he doesn't move fast.
he does it. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for it too. You find
Yeah.
out that the poor actress inside that costume could only see out of Hoggle's mouth,
Oh no.
Oh.
and otherwise was like in darkness
Oh,
like the whole
geez.
time. And like there's animatronic people controlling all the facial movements.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
all the A team in the background are
Yeah.
controlling all his facial stuff. So that's,
Yeah.
but that's why like you see him a lot of times with his mouth kind of just hanging open.
Yeah.
It's so she can watch.
Oh,
And you know how like there's just scenes where he's like moving around or whatever, and his
Yeah.
mouth is moving.
yeah.
And you got, of course, you have the brilliant Brian Henson in the background
Yeah.
making all the.
Yeah.
Well, he did that on purpose because when they were filming it, they had to move the mouth a little bit so she could see.
yeah.
So they made Hoggle like this grumpy guy that kind of like all the time, and it's kind of like, all right, that's a cool little add-in for the where you'd increase this character.
Yeah.
But you're also dealing with the practical of like the poor actress is blind and such.
Well, it's hard to move as well. She goes behind the scene where she's trying to pick up a handkerchief and she goes, "How long is this movie gonna be?"
Because she had, those like as a kid, those little kind of like grabby hands where you kind of like pull the thing, and the hand would grab.
Yeah.
That's what she had to try and manipulate things, just like those grabby things. Not very dexterous ones either. They're really kind of clunky. And she got motion sickness all the time. Aww. And they had to like pull up the mask so she could just like throw up or something or gag and just give her some time to like see.
Oh jeez, that's rough.
So I'm like, whew. I'm like, that poor woman. But then you see her on the screen. It's like, you're doing great. But I'm like, man.
Yeah, you've gone through a lot of suffering to get there.
Yeah. Just like there's long scenes of like hilarity happening because like Jareth juggles those orbs all the time.
And someone's
they
behind.
hired a juggler.
Yeah, they're a professional juggler.
Like, sideways.
And he can't. A lot of the scenes where like, especially where both hands are seen.
Yeah.
Those are his hands, not Bowie's hands. Yeah. And he's juggling the stuff. So the guy is like pressed all the way against Bowie to do all this stuff. And like being a juggler, you have to kind of look at your hands.
Yeah.
So he's blind while he's doing all this kind of stuff. And apparently there's just cutscene after cutscene of the guy like fumbling and dropping the orbs and whatever. Yeah. And Bowie, to his credit, and the guy working with him found it hilarious. So like something would happen and Bowie would just start laughing and stuff because they're trying to do this significant scene where he's juggling these orbs. It's supposed to look really cool, but the guy's having such a hard time because all he can do is just kind of go off, just feel.
And he's been over halfway. Like
and Bowie just was cracking up at times because like how difficult it was, whatever. But he's trooped through it anyway instead of pulling a prima donna moment where it's like, no, it's going to look really great.
Yeah.
And he thought the guy was doing an amazing job, but understood it's just like, well, he's blind back there trying to move these glass orbs around. And so there was a guy like with a giant like box and just hand out orbs for each take to keep things going.
Oh, jeez.
Because they couldn't really afford to like take the time to let the juggler back away and get out of the costume and readjust Jareth's costume. It's like, no, you got to suffer through this for like hours.
That's crazy. Again, a lot of work went into this movie.
Yes.
A lot of work. So Ludo is our next character. I love this because like Sarah wants to save Ludo, obviously.
Yeah.
And these guys have these little bitey little armed hand things. Like
well, they're little lizard creatures on the end of sticks.
And they're just torturing poor Ludo. And so she's like, but here's what I forgot about. So she's like, I got to stop him. The rocks roll to her.
Yeah.
Because he's calling to them.
And we don't find out about that until later.
Yeah.
And so you think back and you go, Ludo was giving her the rocks so that she could save him.
Yeah.
You don't realize that until you find out about his power later and you go, Ludo's got some power.
Yeah.
Ludo's got some magic.
Well, Ludo's, like I said it last night, I think it's like he's the MVP.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have gotten anywhere without Ludo and his juice.
Yep.
So
his power is really unique. So she throws a couple rocks at the guys, and she does it so that they think that each other's doing it.
Yeah.
So they start attacking each other, and it's totally hilarious, but it works because they eventually chase each other out, and you can see them keep going. And then she goes and saves Ludo. And he's just this gentle giant who's just so kind, but also so scared. And, she's just like, okay, well, where do we go? And then the door knocker scene.
Yeah.
It reminds me of
It's very Monty Python.
Well, it's also very much like the scene in Muppet Christmas Carol, where there's the knocker and it comes alive and it says, and so here you get that, but you get with two. And what I said to James is that practical effects?
He's like,
because
yes.
It looks so good.
It looks great.
And it's practical.
It's not CGI because it's the 80s.
Yep. And so they do it, and because it looks so good, you think it's CGI because of how it moves so effortlessly and effectively. But the scene doesn't just exist for a second. It exists for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's brilliant. Oh, I don't want that back in my mouth. And I love how she plugs his nose.
Yeah.
And then
so
shoves
brilliant.
it back in. And he's like, oh, well, I probably deserve that.
Yeah.
I just was like, oh. And then she goes in. And where do they go from there? I can't even remember. Through the door.
Oh, it's like the woods. This is weird.
Oh,
no, wait, no, is it?
No, they go down. They fall down. Is this where they fall down?
No, I think that's before they fall down. I think they're in the woods because then they come across these things that remind me of Fraggle Rock characters.
Oh, it's the fire dance.
Well, that's because they get separated.
Somehow.
They're walking, and Ludo, they're going through the woods. Ludo falls down some sort of trap and
I
just
think
disappears.
he falls into the Eternal Stench area because he ends up there.
Yeah, because that's where he ends up.
Yeah,
but she
so-
was walking fine.
Yeah.
And then we have the fire gang.
Yep. Now, the reason for the fire gang and why they're called the fire gang is, James.
Okay. I guess we kind of skipped it over, but it's okay. In the beginning scenes of her room, you see all the stuff that inspires all this world and everything. Look, if you pause while they're panning through a room, you can see all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's interesting. There's one fact I'll bring up later, which is really cool, that a lot of people miss in that opening thing too. But in there's a book called Where the Wild Things Are, by Maurice Sendak. And Jim Henson wanted to kind of bring Sendak into this too, and influences from him. So these guys that we see called the Fire Gang were originally supposed to be like the wild things, whatever. And they were inspired by Where the Wild Things Are. And he brought in Maurice Sendak, and they kind of showed him the movie and whatever, and he just was not on board. So they had to change it, especially the song, whatever, and it became the Fire Gang because it's kind of close to Wild Things, whatever. What they could fit into that line in the song, and that's how we got the Fire Gang, even though they really don't have anything to do with fire. They're just crazy things acting wild and nutty and removing body parts and reattaching them and all kinds of stuff. That's where the Fire Gang comes from. It's also, this is one of those scenes where it's like, we talked about how Jim Henson loved to push the envelope on things. So having them dance around, like these puppets kind of dance around her but keep the dark forest theme, you can kind of see a really bad kind of green screening and matte thing going on where they didn't have the ability to make this as smooth and as pretty as everything else. So you got clipped little bits and pieces of these. It's really awkward, kind of terribly looking shots. And even Jim Henson was like, this is all wrong. It never came out right. And kind of they moved on from the Fire Gang as quickly as kind of like possible. I don't know, even they could have just cut it out and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
They just have like Ludo fall down a pit and she gets lost for a little while and then boom. Then you have the whole swamp of Eternal Stench.
Yep.
But that's where that comes from, folks. That's where the Fire Gang Wild Things thing is, because Maurice Sendak wasn't on board.
Yeah. I feel like it's really towards the end when they start taking off their heads and they're like, oh, let's take off your head. And she's like, wait, no. And they're like, no, we need to take your head off.
Yep.
And then the Hoggle actually saves her, which brings us into an issue that happened in the past where the Goblin King's like, oh, well, if she kisses you, I'm going to send you to the land of stenches. So she is excited.
Thank you for saving me.
Saved her life. So she kisses. She's like, no, don't kiss me.
Well, he also threatens to turn him into a prince.
Of
Stench.
Stench.
Of Stench. And he's like, no. But she does it anyway, and nothing ever comes of it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they end up down in the Stench, and they get to the bridge.
Yeah.
And we get one of our another favorite character, and his dog.
I'm going to make a nerd reference that maybe no one will get, but he reminded me of a character from the Chronicles of Narnia, Reapy Cheep. There's this mouse that wants to beat up everybody that's bigger than him. He's absolutely fearless, or like Don Quixote a little bit. Made me think of that.
The character is actually inspired by one of the creators or producers or artist guy's dog, which was a small little terrier that yapped at everything and was super aggressive.
Yep.
But was actually just kind of like a sweetheart, really.
Yeah.
That's
all bark and no bite.
Yeah, that's what the character was inspired by, was that little yappy dog.
Yeah. I liked it because it's just kind of a cool break. It's kind of a downtime in the action we've had.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to meet this character and get to know his little bit of a story. And then she says, well, how would we get across? Well, you have to ask my permission.
Didymus. There we go.
Didymus, yeah. Didymus. And she says, well, let me have your permission to cross. And he goes, well, yes. She's like, thank you. And he goes along with them, and he's like, but wait. And he's like, okay, we can come along. And we said they go along, and they get through the bog and all that.
Yeah, because Ludo summons the stones. This is where you really they figure out that Ludo can speak to the stones by summoning the rocks that they can walk across.
It's really kind of a cool scene because you're just like, because the bridge falls apart. And Ludo, he does. And it's really kind of cool because again, more layers of his character become kind of evolved and revealed.
Yeah.
And it's appreciated because he doesn't try to front load it. He just shows us eventually and slowly but surely these are the powers that Ludo uses. And it's not power that he just uses once and goes away. This power returns for use continually, which is again a strong part of that story. So they get through the bog. What happens next after the bog?
After the bog is when they have the scene where they're walking and they start talking
you
about how
should
they're
get hungry.
and
Yeah.
then the peach that Jareth gave
he gives it to
Hoggle to
her.
give to her.
Yep.
Hoggle just caves into his kind of like cowardly nature
Well,
because
he tries
resists.
to throw it away.
Yeah.
He tries to throw
And
it in the
then
bog of stench. And
Jareth-
Jared's like, I wouldn't do that if I were you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, come on. I
Yeah.
can't. It's like,
But then he eventually does it,
He gives her the peach,
and she
and it kind of
forgets
Yeah.
everything and
It-
almost dies.
Yeah.
Basically. And so she goes into this dream world
the masquerade
where
ball.
she dances with Bowie a little bit. It's the word's not creepy. It is unsettling, and it is very like cracked in how it happens and how it kind of goes. But you're wanting to find out how does she get out of it eventually, which she does. She breaks through the glass.
Yeah.
Eventually, but not all the way through. So then she ends up in the trash yard,
Yeah.
or whatever. And
Because I think that masquerade ball thing is another thing where we've seen where they've done the duality thing.
Yep.
Because like everything is so fine and beautiful and pretty, but then you look at the close up of their masks and the people's faces and they're hideous, and their laughter is not like happy laughter.
it's like they're
kinda
mocking her.
Yes, it's like
Like
dark,
they're making fun of her.
creepy laughter.
So behind the scenes was saying this is like her in the adult world, and she
Yes.
realizes I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah, she's not there yet because she wants to claim to be an adult, but she's not an adult.
yeah,
So
she's not
it's-
quite there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she dances, gets out, and then the pack ladies, I guess you could call them is the best
Yes.
word. They give her, oh, you've been looking for this
At the
and-
junkyard. Yeah.
At the junkyard, and then they bring her into under the pile. She ends up in in her room, and the pack ladies are agents of Jareth.
Yes.
And their
Kind of,
goal their goal is to keep her in her home, not
Mm-hmm.
leaving, so she can continue her mission.
Here's all the wonderful material things you love. Here,
Yep.
more material
Yep,
things.
yep.
Material things.
And she's like, I'm supposed to remember something. I'm supposed to remember something. And they done messed up because she finds a copy of the Labyrinth,
Whoops.
and she starts to read,
And she remembers.
and she remembers Toby. I'm supposed to find Toby, and she goes, no, and all of a sudden, which I love it, the house collapses,
Yeah.
and begins to fall apart.
And at the moment, her friends are there to rescue her.
Yep.
Yeah.
So she climbs out. They pull her out. They rescue her. She's saved. And I think Hoggle sees her from a distance and realizes she's still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And then he doesn't. Does he go after her at that point, or he doesn't show up until a little bit later?
Maybe he has to catch up.
I think he has to
He's
catch
I
up.
behind.
think he has to catch. My brain for some reason is fuzzy on this because after this moment is when they get to the gates of the
Yep.
city. So he's not with them because he helps them
Yeah.
fight the gate guard.
So they get to the gate and they get inside. And everyone's asleep because it's Goblin City, which is interesting. I like that mythology that nobody's really awake, like they're all tired and sleeping and whatever. So then they get in, and then the door closes, revealing this massive monstrosity robot.
Yep.
And I love how they set it up because it's just like you're wondering, okay, what's coming, without really telling you. You're like, and all of a sudden it's mobile. And it's swinging and it's killing. Like it doesn't kill anybody, but it comes dang close.
But yeah, it's like that cool thing where it's like the two halves are in those gate doors.
Yeah.
So it's not whole until they shut the gate.
Yep.
And then the whole thing is like one giant suit.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's a really cool kind
Yeah.
of effect to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. Again, Muppet Masters, man. They create the craziest stuff. And then, of course, Didymus tries to fight it, and the dog runs away.
Yeah, Ambrosius is the cowardly dog.
Yep, cowardly dog
Great.
doesn't.
And he rides like a horse, which just cracks me up.
I love it. I love that idea. Very, very cool there. I'm trying to think of the Redwall. It's kind of like a Redwall kind of thing,
Yes.
where like things happen in this world that are very weird, but they're normal because that's just how it works. So then they're trying to fight it, but then finally Hoggle shows up, and he jumps on top of it and opens up the head, and it's just another dude working the controls.
It's like, is Jim Henson making fun of himself? I think he's making fun of
Yeah.
himself.
I think there is probably some tongue in cheek, and so he pulls him out and tries to like stop it, but can't control it, and so eventually it just short circuits, and he jumps and
no
falls.
one catches him. They don't even try.
Just no one catches him.
Yeah, it's just that awkward like moment where he just kind of flops on the ground.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's fantastic. So he flops on the ground. They get him. And he's like, I'm not going to apologize, but I'm a coward. And she's like, I forgive you. You're still my friend. So then they get in, and they're on their way. And at this point, I think the guard goes to Jareth and says, they're in. They've got the
And
case.
then he sends out his army.
Right, and his army goes, and they're getting him. They're getting after him, And then, of course, we have to have the rocks.
Oh, yeah.
The attack of the avalanche of rocks. And it is fantastic. It's almost like a Keystone Cops kind of thing, like but it's done so well and so funny.
Yeah, and they're running back and forth.
Yeah.
And Ludo opens up the whole house to get inside. And it's like...
He just peels the wall away and then shuts it. It's like, oh, that's
They're
fantastic.
banging on the broken wall
Yeah.
on the door to get in.
And it's like super slapstick. And the goblins get like smashed by these rocks, but are okay.
Yeah.
And it's for comedy's sake.
But it's like comedy that works.
Yeah.
Like it's not like, oh, this is dumb. It's like, okay, this is kind of fun. Like I'm enjoying the rules of how this is being made.
Yeah.
So it goes through that. It works out well. And then this goes on for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But not in like, oh my gosh, is this over yet? It's like, okay, everything, like they're figuring it out. And then they get into the Goblin King's castle.
Yep.
And it's empty. He's gone wherever he is. And this is an interesting moment because in most movies, the entire group would go up and fight the bad guy.
Yep.
But in this moment, she chooses to say, I need to do this alone. I need to face him alone. And they said, well, okay. And they don't fight her on it.
But we're here if you need us.
You're here if you need us, just call. But this is the last moment we see them. After this, they don't come back until the end. And I think it's very interesting the narrative choice that they did there. Because it doesn't, we are left without them. And we are sad without those characters.
Yeah.
And I love how it creates an absence both for her, but also for us. Because we're like, but wait, we love those guys. That we want to see them save and help you. Okay, I guess you got to go on your own. All right, let's go.
Well, I mean, it's also a good function of growing up because a lot of times,
exactly.
like I said, it's like they're her friends, but they're not with her all the time to face everything. But they're there.
Yeah.
But they're not always there for all the important. So this is kind of like one of those good moments too, where it's kind of like your friends are there. You could crutch them all the time and lean on them.
Yeah.
But you can't do that.
Yeah.
Too. You got to do some growing up on your own.
Yep, exactly. So she goes and she fights Jareth.
Yep.
And the scene with the stairs is just
the Escher like
the special effects and the way that whole it was all that set was built as it was, and they had like a dummy that would like flip up and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Like just watch the scene, folks. Like
it's
that.
legit.
It's so cool.
It's pretty legit.
And it's based on a piece of artwork.
Yeah.
I don't know the artist.
It's hanging off her wall.
Yeah.
In her bedroom.
It's MC Escher.
Yeah, it's
is
MC
the
Escher's the artist.
Yeah.
But I forget the actual name of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's on her wall.
Yeah.
And it's really cool.
Yeah. And the way that they play with it and all that is legit. So at this point, when does she gets out of that?
Well, they're still in it, and then it just blows apart.
Yeah.
Because she finally has her confrontation face to face with Jareth.
So this is where she has to recite the lines.
Yeah.
And does he have the baby with him? No, the baby's somewhere else.
Yeah, they don't really have the baby at this scene.
He's somewhere else. He's whatever. And
he's crawling around somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so she is saying she has to recite the lines. And she gets to that point where she forgets again.
Yeah, the same line that she started in the beginning of this movie.
Yep.
Right. Which I love that it comes full circle. It makes sense as a narrative, but I love that they call back to it and they had the foresight to say, okay, we're going to show you in the beginning where she's trying, and now she has to really master it this time around.
Yeah.
And so she does. She I forgot this line, and she kind of tries to remember, and I don't know how long it takes her, but then she finally says. And he's kind of
it's pretty quick because he's still talking to her, trying to like schmooze his way through it, and whatever time is ticking down.
And then she says, "You have no power over me." And the look on Bowie's face is just out of frustration, and like just unhappiness that she won because he just drops whatever he has.
Well, the crystal ball that he was like, your dreams. This is your dreams.
Yeah.
I can give it to you. Blah blah blah. Yeah. And he just kind of like drops it, and that's when everything falls apart.
Yeah. Well, he kind of just goes. Ugh. Yeah. And he just like it almost contemptuously says, "That's it. I'm out of here." But I can't like. It's that part of like he knows he's done.
Yeah.
But he's still mad at her.
Yep.
And he's like, "How dare you?" And he's just like, "Bah!"
But it's very subtle.
Yeah.
It's not overplayed. It's just that kind of.
You're just like, "Oh man, he's not happy about
Great,
this."
I've lost.
But he doesn't go, "No, don't kill me." It's just like, "Fine, you win."
Yeah.
Grr. And so he vanishes. There's no big explosion. There's no big fire. There's no big.
He doesn't die or anything like that. No.
It's just gone.
Yeah.
And she returns. She picks up the baby. She finds her brother.
Yep.
And I can't remember. Does she transition back to the house, or how does she get back in the house?
I think it transitions back, and Jared is there. He's an owl, and he leaves as the owl. Then brother's in the crib.
Baby's
like
in the crib.
happened.
Everything's happy.
Okay.
She goes back into her room. The parents announce that they're home.
What's interesting is that like you don't see the parents.
Oh, it was the ticking of the clock, and then they kind of transition, and she's back in the house.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
I think if I'm remembering
I
right.
think you're right.
Okay. So the parents we don't see them.
Yeah.
But they say, "Hey, we're home," and does she respond to them?
No.
She doesn't. I mean, they probably just were like, "Oh, well, she's up there somewhere," and they probably
because like she hops over, she checks on Toby, I think, and then she goes back into her room.
Yeah.
And that's where you get the happy moment.
Yeah, and she starts to put away her childhood stuff.
Yep.
She starts to put away the things in the desk, and it serves as kind of that
I
transition
didn't catch that. Wow.
of she's taking away and putting things away.
She's growing up.
She's growing up. But the cool part is that, how they show up in her mirror.
Yeah.
They said, "Oh, we'll miss you. Whenever you need us," and she goes, "I need you now." And I love it because it's almost an emotional moment. And when I watched it, I got a little choked up because I was just like, we all understand what it's like to grow up. We also understand what it's like to still have access to those memories of our childhood or our pieces of our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have stuff and toys from my childhood that I still have in boxes that I pull out every so often and I look at because it's cool. Like it's my history. It's my world. And for her, Hoggle and all of those guys, whether or not they're represented in either like stuffed animal portion or however they're actually metaphorically represented, they are there for her. And she will as she grows, she will go back to them every so often to reflect and be strong with and everything like that. But I love how everybody comes back. And
because you have goblins there.
Yeah, the goblins from Jareth. Yeah,
wearing party hats like it's a birthday.
Yeah, and she just jumps into them and like
she's hugging them. And
it's just like the way and the music and how it all goes and it pulls out and we just kind of it ends just the way it should.
Yeah, with Jareth kind of flying away.
Yeah, it's legit. I love it, and it's one of those movies that it's one of the few 80s movies that survived. Like the Goonies and this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's movies that have not held the test of time. We talked about Legend, and I'm sure there's more that if we really wanted to dig in, we could. But this one actually works because it's timeless.
Yeah.
There's not stuff in there that's like a part of our time or whatever that's like the jokes don't hold up or whatever. Like the humor is timeless. The humor is in the moments, not in the piece of history that it was produced in.
Well, and the lessons are still
Totally.
everybody
Don't take things for granted.
can relate to the lessons in this movie.
Yeah.
Because there is those times where you do transition. Like you have to take your toys and put them aside and deal with things. You have to start growing up, take responsibility, realize things aren't fair.
Yep. That's life.
And tackle all those lessons on your own.
Yep.
Or even with your friends helping you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a solid one. Like we ended that movie and I was just like, oh, that was good.
Yeah,
like,
that was a good note. I'm glad we watched this one like second.
Yes, definitely. It was so depressing the other way around.
Oh, yeah. I don't think watching Legend the second would have helped anything in that situation. All right, so review of this movie.
Oh my gosh, like a 9. It's so
Yeah.
good.
It's a 9.
I would say 9.5 for me, just because of how it layers and how well it layers.
And David Bowie wrote the music.
Yeah,
as well.
5 of the songs that are in there, that's his contributions.
Yep.
And he did it because he wanted to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's having fun.
Yeah.
Like you can tell he is really enjoying it. And every one of the actors, like they actually are genuinely engaging with the material and just chomping the scenery, and it's just this is one of the great ones.
I mean, it's good. I mean, it's also like there's deeper implications in the story. We talked about it briefly, where it's kind of like a lot of those goblins were kids that never got saved.
Yeah.
Those women out there with all the junk on their back.
Yeah.
Those are other Sarahs
Yeah.
that are now goblinoids that are trapped with all their material stuff.
Yep.
It's kind of like, wow. All right, so how long has Jareth been kicking around?
Yep.
How long has he been playing this game?
He's almost like a Captain Hook character-ish from like the Neverland. But not as comedy-inducing and far less kind of easy.
Well, there's an interesting take on the Peter Pan story if you really want to get into it.
Maybe for later. Well, is what's the
That's a short little thing where it's like Captain Hook is not a bad guy here.
Yeah.
He's actually kind of a good guy who's
Right.
trying to save people because Peter Pan doesn't want anybody to grow up. And that's why he has his beef with like adults.
Yeah.
And he's killing boys that grow up.
Okay.
Like the Lost Boys and stuff like that. The other pirate crew that are supporting Captain Hook are boys that escaped Peter.
Okay.
Because if you read the original story,
Yeah.
it's in there. Peter is a very violent figure.
Huh.
And like the pirates and stuff that inhabit Neverland are boys that escaped Peter's thing.
Okay.
Gosh, they're like
And
social
Hook.
workers. Wow.
And it's really weird where it's kind of like, wait, there's a deeper, all fairy tales, because even in legend, all the fairy tales that they came from, like Grimm's fairy tales, there's usually more duality built into it.
Yeah.
Like Disney spun it into like a fantastic, nice thing, whatever. But no, in the real story, you look between the lines, it's kind of like, wait, Hook is kind of the good guy here. Peter's dark.
Yeah. Interesting. There you go. And on that bombshell.
So that's a quick little drop there for everybody.
Yeah,
go read the original Peter Pan. You can and look at the stuff. You can see it's in there.
Yeah.
It's like, woo.
Interesting.
Wow.
Learn something new every day. All right. Well, this has been Nerds by Screenlight. We are not sure what we're going to dig into next.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about it yet.
We'll figure that out.
Like The Hobbit is coming, folks. We talked about it, but I just picked up and started reading the book again.
So we'll be digging into that along with the movies as well at some point down the road. So, my name is Aaron.
I'm James.
I'm Vicki.
And this has been Nerds by Screenlight. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care.
The raspberry flapovers will be out in a moment. The kitchen is closed.
You've been listening to the Nerds by Screenlight podcast, presented by Create at Morgan Productions, located in Fort Morgan, Colorado, USA. For more information on our production house, other podcasts hosted here, and further details, please visit www.createatmorgan.org. You can find us on Twitter at the handle CreateAtMorgan. Create at Morgan is a school club at Lincoln High School, our alternative education campus in Morgan County. Our sponsor is Aaron DeLay, a language arts teacher at Lincoln. Send any feedback to adelayedteacher@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to our podcast.